Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Cherry Pickers Podcast, a podcast where we talk all things hockey. I am Zach, aka Zoo, and I'm joined here by my co-host Brody.
How's it going, everybody? Excited to be back. Already 5 episodes in on episode 6. It's been a pretty solid journey so far, and just excited to keep her going.
Yeah, today is episode number 6. It's been a good ride so far. A bit of a lackluster week this week in the NHL and the hockey world. Not a whole lot of news coming out this week, which hopefully just means that next week will be a little bit more jam-packed. But we're going to start off by just saying that in this episode, we will not be addressing anything related to the Russia and Ukraine situation. We just don't really want anything taken out of context. So with that said, we will not be talking about anything related to that. I hope you all understand. But let's start with some NHL news. Brody, hit me with some news.
Well, we got some solid news from last week. Duncan Keith returns to Chicago for the first time since the trade between the Oilers and the Hawks. The Edmonton Oilers players, they gave a bit of a welcome back for Duncan Keith when he walked back into the United Center. They were all waiting for him with their sticks raised, and they had a red carpet waiting for him in the dressing room, so that was pretty cool to see. And excited for Duncan Keith to be back, but unfortunately the Oilers did not get a win out of that game, but he actually took the ceremonial puck drop for the game against Jonathan Toews. So
I was going to ask, did you see that puck drop?
I did, yeah. They actually,
it was pretty funny.
they got into a bit of a tie-up there. Like, it was pretty intense for a ceremonial
a little bit of a
drop.
scuffle. Yeah. It was only fitting. Duncan Keith is such a just a rigid, hard-nosed, hard-working hockey player. So it was pretty fitting. It was pretty funny to see that face-off. But yeah, that was cool to see. It was nice to see Duncan Keith. He spent his entire career with the Chicago Blackhawks. So this is his first year away from Chicago. So it was nice to see the fans give him a warm welcome back. It was it was a good situation all in all. So that was cool to see. What else, Brody?
Oh, yeah. Other news from the NHL. John Cooper, he got into a bit of a match of words there with Wes McCauley. He actually got ejected from the Tampa-Pittsburgh game. I'm not exactly sure what was said, but apparently something happened. Maybe the officiating wasn't as up to par or something. But yeah, John Cooper just got absolutely livid, and Wes McCauley just gave him the boot. So not every day that you see a coach getting ejected from a game, especially of John Cooper, who is actually a pretty calm and easygoing coach. So a bit of a surprise there.
Yeah, I read into a little bit of that earlier today. So what it seems like happened was basically there was a bit of an altercation after a whistle, and Tampa Bay seemed to get penalized more than the Pittsburgh Penguins did, and John Cooper was not overly happy about it. And John Cooper was never given an explanation why their team got more penalties than the Pittsburgh Penguins. So he was a little bit rattled that he was never given an explanation by Wes McCauley, and they received a bench minor afterwards because of the chirps and whatnot to the referees. And yeah, Cooper ended up getting ejected. He said in a post-game press conference, he basically he explained the situation saying that he was never given an understanding of why they got over penalized compared to Pittsburgh did, and he's basically harping on Pittsburgh for, he basically called them the least penalized team in the league, and he wasn't sure why. And yeah, John Cooper not happy about what happened in that game, obviously, as he got ejected. But yeah, like you said, it's not every day that a coach gets ejected from a game. I think, honestly, the last one I remember is, you remember the whole Paul Maurice incident in Winnipeg?
I actually don't remember that, to be honest.
The only reason I remember that is because it comes up in so many compilations that I watch on YouTube and stuff like that. But I just remember Paul Maurice, like, he was chatting with the refs and he was getting pissed off after it was either the first or second period. They came back out for the next period, and Maurice was still harping and yelling at the coaches. And before the puck even dropped for the period, he got ejected. That's the last one I remember off the top of my head. I honestly can't remember when a coach got ejected last, but yeah, like you said, not every day that a coach gets ejected. So that was pretty interesting to see. Tampa Bay did get smashed up in that game. They lost 5-1 to Pittsburgh. So I think the power plays were definitely a key contributor to that. So yeah, interesting situation there out in Tampa.
Yes, I want to talk about something coming up here. We got the trade deadline approaching in a few weeks here, and there's one player that as we all know, he did request a trade earlier in the season. Still hasn't been traded yet, and that is Jake DeBrusk. Last few games, he's really been heating up. He's been playing on that top line with Patrice Bergeron and I believe Brad Marchand. They've all been on a line together, and he put up a hat trick against LA, and he's really been producing offensively, rising his stock. So I'm going to ask you this. Come trade deadline, do you think Jake DeBrusk will be on a new NHL team? And if so, which team do you think he lands?
Well, I think one big factor when it comes to Jake DeBrusk is he's on an expiring deal. So, obviously Boston doesn't want to lose him for free. And it does sound like Jake DeBrusk is willing to work with the Bruins organization to get a contract extension, which will help him get moved kind of thing. I think he will get moved. Realistically, I'm not sure where he'll get moved. I would like to see, it's Jake DeBrusk doesn't have that much of a draft stock. He was a good prospect when he got drafted. He hasn't really clicked that much in the NHL, but he's kind of one of more of those lower risk prospects, or not prospects, but lower risk players, to take a chance on for a team. I could definitely see a team like the Los Angeles Kings. I could see a team going for a guy like Jake DeBrusk, even like the Minnesota Wild. Because like I said in a previous episode, Minnesota Wild's forward depth is really lackluster, and they've definitely been playing like over expectations. So I could see a team like Minnesota or LA being the destination for Jake DeBrusk, but I think realistically, it all just depends on if DeBrusk can come to an agreement with the Bruins for that extension, and it comes down to price as well. I'm not really sure what the asking price is for DeBrusk. Let's hope it's less than Ben Sherratt's asking price, but yeah, I think if he does get moved, I could see a team like Minnesota or LA being his destination with their, a little bit lackluster forward course. So that'll be something definitely interesting to watch and see what happens coming closer to deadline day.
Yeah, to be honest, in my own opinion, I don't see him being moved for anything higher than like a second round pick. Because just like you said, his stock isn't as high as it was when he was drafted, and I mean, his production over his career hasn't been enough to justify anything higher than that. I mean, he's probably right around the 0.5 point per game mark, I would say, over his whole career. But don't get me wrong, he's a very good complementary player.
Okay, but another thing to think about with Jake DeBrusk is how many high-scoring forwards are available at this trade deadline. Like, you got Tomas Hertl potentially, you got Claude Giroux. Is there like any other like natural scorers that are at this deadline?
Not really. Not a whole heck of a lot.
So that's another thing you got to factor in as well, is if you're a team that's looking for offense and you're looking for a player to generate offense, there's not a whole lot of selection when it comes to this trade deadline, and teams get pretty desperate when it comes to the trade deadline. So you never know. We could see an overpay for Jake DeBrusk, or we could see a drastic underpay. I could also see another team like Detroit, like with Stevie Y in the front office. You don't want to make a trade with Stevie Y. You you really don't. And I could see a team like Detroit, who's got tons of cap space. They've got places on the roster for a guy like Jake DeBrusk, and that's the thing, is you could see an overpay, you could see an underpay. It really just depends on how desperate your team is when it comes to scoring. And like I said, other than really Tomas Hertl and Claude Giroux, there's not a whole lot of forwards available at this deadline. It's really a lot of defensemen. So yeah, I'm not sure what the asking price is, but like you said, yeah, second, I don't see anything more than that, but I guess we'll have to find out, eh?
Stevie Y is definitely not a GM you mess with, and
no.
Edmonton fans, I'm sorry to tell you, I know you love Louis DeBrusk and you would love to see his son come into Edmonton, but it's just not going to happen.
It's not.
He's not going there. So for Oilers fans wishing that was going to happen, sorry, it's just the reality is he's just not.
When it comes to Edmonton, like, you got to remember that the Oilers don't need more forwards. They really don't.
No, they do not.
If you're Ken Holland at this trade deadline, you get a defenseman or you get a goalie. That's it. I mean, the play of Koskinen, other than against Chicago there, even then, like, he didn't play that bad against Chicago. He did give up that, he assisted on that one goal, but the play of Koskinen lately, Koskinen's been playing pretty good, and Stuart Skinner's only had one look in the past little bit here, but he got a shutout in that one game he played. So, I mean, the goaltending's kind of coming around a little bit. Honestly, like, I know, with Edmonton, everyone's like, hey, they need a goalie, they need a goalie, they need a goalie. I still truly think that Edmonton's defense core is still too weak. And if I'm Ken Holland right now, and you see how Koskinen has been playing lately with this defense core, I think you honestly jump for a defenseman before you jump for a goalie. So that's why I'm thinking. I've put out on Twitter a lot. I've been seeing a lot of people like, okay, give me your wildest trade deadline predictions. I could honestly see Edmonton getting a player like John Klingberg or Ben Sherratt or something like that. To even, I hate to say it, but hey, even maybe Mark Giordano too, But yeah, with Edmonton, they don't need more forwards. They're not going to get Jake DeBrusk. As much as that would be so cool to have Jake DeBrusk play for the team that Louis DeBrusk commentates for, it's not going to happen, Oilers fans. It just isn't.
No, and honestly, in terms of like the trade deadline, honestly, I would rather see Mike Smith go out than Mikko Koskinen right now, just because
100%.
I mean, Stuart Skinner is not getting anything out of being in Bakersfield anymore. I mean, he's been dominating the league down there. I think his record down there is like 10-1-2 or something like that.
Okay. Let's not say dominating, because you're forgetting about another goalie down there. I'm sorry I had to barge him, but you're forgetting about Dustin Wolf down there. Dustin Wolf, by the way, playing incredible right now for the Stockton Heat. Not to disregard Stuart Skinner, but yeah, no, I agree with you, Brody, with moving Mike Smith out. Continue on, though.
Well, I guess you have to bring up Dustin Wolf, but I mean, I was just going on the point of Edmonton at the trade deadline. I mean, Stuart Skinner's not getting anything out of playing in Bakersfield anymore. He's proven he's ready to be in the NHL, and it's time to bring him up. I mean, he's 23, going to be 24. He's kind of in that age where he's starting to really mature into being like a backup, like a 1B backup. I don't think he's ready to be a legitimate starter by any means, but I would say it's better for Edmonton to have Stuart Skinner being on the team full time right now than Mike Smith, because Mike Smith is pushing 40, he's washed up, and he's just, last year was a complete fluke.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Complete honest. I mean, did he play great last year? Absolutely, but that was a one-off. You can't expect him to do that. Nobody did. I didn't expect him to have that same season again. I mean, with his age, you just can't rely on it. He's been injury prone. He's been injured like 3 times this year, and he's played under like 15 starts. And when you're trying to catch up in the NHL right now at that age, when you're being out for forever, it's just not going to go well. And personally, I don't understand why he didn't go down to Bakersfield for a conditioning stint before he was just tossed right back into the net. That was a thing I didn't really like about Tippett, was he had a relationship with Mike Smith, and he put him in when like it was just completely unnecessary to put him in. And yeah, anyways, yeah, guess we'll see what Edmonton does at the deadline. But
that's
yeah,
the
Jake
thing
DeBrusk,
too. Going back to Mike Smith, so many people question, they're like, why would you sign him for a 2-year extension at that much money, at his age and his injury prone and stuff like that? When Mike Smith comes off a season like that, you have no choice, because you don't know if he's gonna perform like that again the next year. Like, what happens is, Mike Smith, okay, so last year Mike Smith, where's his stats here? He had a record of 21-6-2 with a 923 and a 231. When a goalie comes off a season that good, you have to extend him, and he's going to be asking for more money, because it's when it comes to negotiations, you say, hey, this is how well I performed. I better get paid for that, And you don't want to risk letting him go to another team and have him perform just as good as that the next year, especially on a team that you're facing. So it put Edmonton in a real bad pickle, because you got overpaid Koskinen, you got Stuart Skinner that's coming up, but then you want to keep Mike Smith around, because if he's going to perform like he did last year, you don't want to lose him, So it kind of put Edmonton in a really crappy situation there with Mike. As funny as that is, with Mike Smith playing good, it put Edmonton in a bad situation, but they're starting to feel the effects of it now, definitely with Stuart Skinner being ready to get at least backup minutes in the NHL. But no, I agree with you. I think Edmonton, if they can any way possible, try and get rid of Mike Smith, bring Stuart Skinner up, clear up a little bit more of that cap space and move on from there. Another thing I wanted to point out, Brody, just to go back on Dustin Wolf, because Dustin Wolf, he doesn't get as much appreciation as he should. So his stats this year, he's got 22 wins, 4 losses, 3 ties. He's got a 924 and he's got a 231. This is his first ever pro season. So he played for the Everett Silvertips for 4 years. He got called up to the Stockton Heat last year for 3 games. And he didn't have the best numbers, in 895 and a 324. But like I said, it's his first pro season. Do you know when Dustin Wolf was drafted, Brody?
I have no idea.
Dustin Wolf was drafted in 2019 by the Flames. 7th round, 214th overall.
Yeah, it's a pretty late round pick for sure.
So yeah, a 923, a 231. He's got 22 wins and 4 losses. And you know why he was drafted so late is because he's just a small goalie. And I'm starting to notice more and more that these small goalies are starting to just come out of nowhere and play so good, but they're drafted so late because teams are still on that mindset that if you're a goalie, you have to be big. You're covering more net, obviously. But these smaller goalies like Dustin Wolf are starting to shine, and it's proven here, in the Stockton Heat with him having 22 wins. Like, Dustin Wolf is going to be an animal for the Flames. You got to think about it that way, too, is the Flames have 4 more years of Jacob Markstrom, and they got this, young guy, Dustin Wolf, playing out of his mind right now coming up. So that's interesting to see. But let's move on. What do you got next, Brody?
Well, I got some more news with Edmonton while we were talking about them. They trade Alex Stalock to the Sharks for future considerations, and for Oilers fans who don't know who that is, I don't blame you. He never even played for them. He was a player brought in, I believe, from the Minnesota Wild at the time is who
Yes.
he was with, and he never played with them because I believe he had a heart condition. I think it's the same one Archibald has or something like
Yes,
that.
it
It's
is.
a myocarditis. So he was on LTIR for quite a while with the Oilers, I believe, the last couple seasons. And I think he just went to Bakersfield not too long ago. I think he was finally on the ice again, and they move him for future considerations because, to be honest, with them already having 3 goalies and being in a bit of a situation, it just didn't make sense for them to have him anymore. So they ship him off to San Jose for future considerations, which who knows what that'll be, but I would imagine it would probably just be like a late round draft pick of some sort, nothing too crazy. So yeah, they move him to San Jose, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Alex Stalock, you were right. He did come over from Minnesota. In the 1920 season with Minnesota, he played 30 games. He had a record of 20, 11, and 4. He had a 910 and a 267. So not a bad goalie, but yeah, like you said, he had that heart condition. He was spent so much time recovering from that. Was playing with Bakersfield, did not have a good record with Bakersfield. Played 5 games. He did have a 3-1-0 record, but an 862 and a 381. So not what you want to see, but fun fact, Stalock just played his first game tonight, Brody. You want to hear how that went?
Sure, let's hear it.
Well, Nashville beat San Jose 8-0.
Yikes.
Stalock had 22 saves on 28 shots. He had a 786 save percentage and a 783 goals against. So that kind of wraps up how Stalock's career has gone in the past couple of years, which is unfortunate too, because he has been a pretty decent goalie. Maybe not a starter, but a decent backup for a good chunk of his career. He played 4 seasons with San Jose, and then he got sent down to the minors for 3 years, and then played 4 seasons with Minnesota. But yeah, not a great debut to come back for. And Nashville absolutely stomped on San Jose tonight, 8-0. Another high-scoring game tonight, Brody, I wanted to bring up. Arizona beating Ottawa 8-5, which was a pretty high-scoring game, but I think the coolest fact out of that game, Nick Schmaltz, 2 goals, 5 assists for 7 points. He sets a franchise record, most points as an Arizona Coyote in a game, or a Winnipeg Jet as well. Most points in that franchise history in one game. 2 goals, 5 assists. Do you think that Chicago was in the wrong for letting go of Schmaltz or what?
I would say that Nick Schmaltz is definitely a solid player. Who was he traded for? Dylan Strome, I think, was a part of that deal?
It was Dylan Strome. I'm just pulling up here. Dylan Strome, Brandon Perlini. I think that might have just, was it 2 for 1? I think it might have just been 2 for 1. Let's see here. Yeah, I think it was just 2 for 1. I think it was just Dylan Strome and Brandon Perlini.
I mean, Dylan Strome's had a pretty decent stint with Chicago, so I mean, I don't know if it's a huge loss getting rid of Nick Schmaltz. Like he's a solid player for sure, and putting up 7 points in a game is obviously very good, and especially when you're on Arizona, who isn't the greatest team depth-wise or anything. But that's a tough one to answer. I mean, they're pretty even caliber players, but I don't think Dylan Strome has hurt the Blackhawks by any means.
Yeah. I mean, the Blackhawks, they have those forwards. DeBrincat's came up. Patty Kane, he's playing pretty good. Kirby Dach and stuff like that. I don't think it's hurt that they lost Nick Schmaltz, but man, I think if Nick Schmaltz was still on the Blackhawks instead of Dylan Strome, I think they'd be a little bit more dynamic of a team. But regardless of that, Schmaltz with a 7-point night. Crazy to see. 8-5 win for Arizona. Matt Murray let in all 8 goals on just over 30 shots. So a little rough outing there for Matt Murray. But yeah, what a night for Nick Schmaltz and what a night for the Arizona Coyotes.
And well, since we're talking about high-scoring games, I got to bring up the Leafs-Detroit game that was 10-7.
Oh my gosh.
And
what a game.
Honestly, I'm rattled that out of all those 10 goals for my fantasy team, John Tavares was only a 0.2 in a 10-7
Hey, but
game.
You know what? John Tavares just broke his 14-game goal drought. So maybe he's coming back for you a little bit. Maybe he feels bad.
But yeah, during that game, I believe the Leafs had a 7-2 lead, and then out of nowhere, they gave up like 5 goals.
They gave a 4. It was 4, yeah. It made 7-6. That was a crazy game.
Yeah, so there's definitely a surge of scoring in the NHL over the past couple of seasons. I mean, games are a lot higher scoring now, which is pretty entertaining for the fans. But if you're the coach of Detroit or Toronto, you don't like that score in that game. Definitely not the most tight defensive game you'll watch.
Yeah, speaking of no tight defense, tonight has been high scoring. Like, looking at these finals, you got Nashville 8-0 over the Sharks. You got Montreal 5-2 over Edmonton. Canucks 6-4 over Toronto. Bruins beat the Blue Jackets 5-4 in a shootout. Washington beat Seattle 5-2. Florida beats Detroit 6-2. Coyotes won 8-5. 4-3 Flyers over Blackhawks. And right now, the Flames and Avalanche are playing just at the end of the first here. It's 2-2 in that game. Elias Lindholm has both goals for the Flames. You love to see it, baby. I love Elias Lindholm. Hands down my favorite player in the league. But yeah, no, it's been no lack of scoring definitely this year, for sure.
All right, well, let's turn it over to more injury news around the league. San Jose's Mario Ferraro is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks with a leg fracture, so you definitely hate to see that. He's been like a pretty solid shutdown defenseman for San Jose. I think he's like a bottom pair guy. I don't really know a whole heck of a lot.
He's actually been playing a decent amount of minutes this year. I'm just pulling up his hockey DB real quick, pull up his stats. He's been a decent actual like piece for that San Jose team. He's actually their alternate captain, which I didn't know. But yeah, he's only gotten 11 points in 48 games. He's definitely more of a defensive defenseman. Only -7, which is actually pretty good, seeming that San Jose is one of the bottom teams when it comes to goal differential. But yeah, that's a big piece there for San Jose. Mario Ferraro has been eating up a lot of minutes this year, and sucks to see a guy go down like that, especially for quite a length. So yeah, all the best for Mario Ferraro there in his road to recovery.
Yeah, other news from around the league too. Nikolai Ehlers returns after missing 19 games, and that's a big addition to the Winnipeg Jets. As Nikolai Ehlers, in my opinion, is probably one of the most underrated players in the league. That guy's got a unreal shot on him. He's fast, he's skilled, and that's a big addition to the Jets, who are trying to make somewhat of a push in to get back in it. But adding Nikolai Ehlers definitely helps with that.
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets are in a really interesting position right now. They're not sitting pretty. They're definitely out of a playoff spot. They have been dealing with quite a bit of injuries lately, but it's good to see Nikolai Ehlers come back. And like you were saying, he is very underrated. I think the biggest aspect of his game that, propels him, to the top is his speed. Like, he's just able to make chances out of nothing with how fast he goes on the ice. So it's good for Winnipeg to bring him back, but it might be a little too late, with how far they are out of a playoff spot right now. And Winnipeg just hasn't been able to get anything going. I have a question for you, Brody.
What's the question?
So if Winnipeg doesn't make the playoffs this year, what do you think happens to Cheveldayoff? Do you think he stays or do you think he goes?
I'm going to say that he goes. And the reason I say this is because the Winnipeg Jets really haven't done much since they made the Western Conference Finals in 2018. I mean, they swept Edmonton last year in the playoffs, but then they just got swept right after by the Montreal Canadiens. And apart from that, they really haven't done much. I believe Calgary beat them in the bubble in the first round, and they've gotten to the playoffs, but they really haven't done a whole heck of a lot. Connor Hellebuck's had a pretty rough season for his standards. They're getting older. I mean, Blake Wheeler's like 34, 35 now. His production has dropped significantly. So for me, like, Cheveldayoff hasn't really built a team that's been able to get there since 2018. So in my opinion, I think Cheveldayoff is probably gone. I mean, Paul Maurice left. I think it was on his own terms.
It was, yeah. He stepped down.
I think Winnipeg could probably just use a fresh start and just kind of start to get some prospects and try to get some younger pieces in, because I don't think the team's there. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup contender.
Brody, I'm honestly going to disagree with you. I genuinely think that this Winnipeg team is obviously they're 100% playing under their expectations. I think this team is way deeper than some teams that are performing right now, and I honestly think that that fault belongs on their coach, Dave Lowry. I think Dave Lowry can't get anything done with this roster, but I don't think it's Cheveldayoff's problem. I think it's really their coaching. You got a starter goalie in Connor Hellebuck, like a star top 3 goalie in the league, Connor Hellebuck right there. You got scorers, you got Kyle Connor, you got Andrew Copp, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Nikolai Ehlers, you got good players, like shutdown players too, like defensive wise. You got, Adam Lowry, Blake Wheeler's been on a tear this year. Mark Scheifele, obviously. But their decor is like really good, honestly. Dylan DeMello, Brendan Dillon, Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk, Nate Schmidt, Logan Stanley, like big bodies. They could play, a 200-foot game. I honestly think this Winnipeg team deserves to be in a playoff spot. Well, obviously not with how they've been playing, but with how good their roster is, they should be in the playoffs. And I truly think that is due to, coaching. Like, I don't think it's Cheveldayoff's, fault at all. I think Dave Lowry will definitely be out before Cheveldayoff goes, but I do think, there is a time frame, and there definitely is, a point where enough's enough, and if that line crosses, then obviously Cheveldayoff's gone. But I truly think the fault here, the result is on the shoulders of Dave Lowry, and even Paul Maurice, didn't get him off to a hot start this season. So I don't know, interesting. But I do have a question for you, Brody. At this trade deadline, Winnipeg, they're about 6 points, I think, out of a playoff spot right now. Are they buyers or sellers?
Before I answer that question, I'm just going to say one more thing about like the Winnipeg Jets. And we didn't really mention how tough of a division they're in as well, which is another thing that hurts their case. I mean, when you got Colorado, Nashville, St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas as well, they're not a bad team. I mean, it's a very competitive division. So yeah, like Winnipeg is definitely like a pretty solid roster with all the players you mentioned. And that's another thing for them too. I think if they were in the Pacific Division, they'd easily be in a playoff spot right now. But to answer your question, I would say they would be conservative buyers. They still have a chance to get in. I don't think they would want to just completely sell house at the deadline if they're still like a competitive team that could turn it around. So I don't see them being sellers, but I don't see them being huge buyers either, if that makes sense. So I'm going to say they're going to be conservative buyers.
Okay, so I got to ask you this then. What about Andrew Copp? So he's on an expiring deal this year. Winnipeg definitely does not have the salary cap space to re-sign him. He's got 13 goals, 31 points in 49 games this year. He plays about 20 minutes of time on ice. He hits, he blocks shots. He really doesn't take penalties. He's only got 8 penalty minutes in 49 games this year. And he wins faceoffs too. He's over 50%. So a guy like Andrew Kopp, do you think he goes or do you think he stays?
Oh man,
because realistically, if you keep Andrew Kopp around, you're looking at potentially not even making the playoffs, and then you can't re-sign him in the offseason and you let him go for free.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer because, like, Andrew Kopp, I mean, if you're trying to make a push and you still have a chance, you would want him around. But like you just said, I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, then you could risk him losing him for nothing. So if he does go, I don't think he would go to a team like the Minnesota Wild who are looking for a center. They just need because a center, you don't want to trade him to a rival team like the Wild, especially when you're in a playoff push.
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't see Andrew Kopp going there. I could see him going potentially out to the Eastern Conference if that was the case. So that's tough. I mean, Andrew Kopp is a pretty solid player, and like Winnipeg would like to have him, but again, like you say, with his contract expiring, you don't want to risk him losing for nothing. I would say if he does go, it would be out east, though.
I think we can judge Winnipeg's plan based on what happens to Andrew Kopp at trade deadline. I think if they trade him, Winnipeg's planning on tanking. Winnipeg's not going to make the playoffs. I think if they keep him, they're going to push for a playoff spot. I really think it's up to Andrew Kopp because you look at it, it's like their forward core is so deep. Yes, when you have Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, players like that. But Kopp is a big piece of that forward core too. Like I said, he plays over 20 minutes a night. He's a two-way guy. He puts, the puck in the net. He plays defensively. He plays responsible. So I really think Andrew Kopp, if he gets traded, then they don't have a chance. They're done. Like, I truly think that's the situation. So, I do want to go on to another segment here. I have a question for you, Brody.
Lay it on me.
As an Oilers fan, and I'm going to answer this too as a Flames fan, but as an Oilers fan, what do you think come trade deadline is the Oilers' worst, like the worst nightmare, like the worst case scenario? What is one thing the Oilers would do or could do that would be the worst thing and that would hurt the Oilers?
In terms of like acquiring
a player, trading a player, not doing anything, what do you think?
I think the worst thing for the Oilers right now would be to trade. Oh man, that's a tough question because I do have a player that Edmonton could trade that would bring in like a star goaltender or even like a star defenseman as well. That could
let's hear it. Let's hear this trade proposition.
So, Oilers fans are obviously not going to like this, but allow me to explain before everyone goes absolutely havoc at
Please
me
and wants say McDavid
and wants to rip my head off. If you're the Edmonton Oilers right now, and the goaltending market isn't all that great. I mean, there isn't any real legitimate starter out there. There's names, but like there's not a goalie that's going to be like mind-breaking. If you're the Oilers and you're trying to clear cap space and you're trying to bring in potentially both a goaltender and a defenseman, there's really only one player on the Oilers besides McDavid that would bring you that return. And that's Leon Draisaitl.
Wow. Really?
If you're, like, obviously, Draisaitl's not going to go. Like, they're not going to trade him. But hypothetically, if they were going to solve those, like, if you're going to bring in a number one goaltender, a number one defenseman, and you have to, like, get money out to bring that money in because you're tight against the cap, the only player that you have of any value besides McDavid is Draisaitl. Like, I mean, obviously they're not going to move him, but that's just a hot take that I have.
That's bold. That's very bold. Now, I want to argue this because there's been a lot of talk. I know a lot of people have been beefing on Twitter. Everyone's saying that Matthews is better than McDavid. with this year, Matthews has obviously just shown pure dominance, in that Eastern Conference. And looking at it from a perspective, if you were to choose between Draisaitl or McDavid right now to build a team around, I think this is going to sound weird to say, but I think I'd rather build a team around Draisaitl, honestly. Draisaitl's defensive game is just miles better, no offense to McDavid, good hockey player, but Draisaitl's 200-foot game is crazy. He's shown, in the past couple of years with his Hart Trophy and, Art Ross and stuff that Draisaitl is just, he's been a better player. He's been, like McDavid obviously, can make plays out of nothing and he's an absolute walking highlight reel. But I don't know. I think like if you had to choose one to trade, McDavid or Draisaitl, you'd be choosing Draisaitl?
I'd be choosing Draisaitl 100%.
I think I'd be choosing McDavid. I honestly think I'd be choosing McDavid. I know it's crazy to think because for the longest time I've been sitting here saying McDavid's the best player in the league, hands down. He's better than Crosby, he's better than Draisaitl, he's better than Matthews. But I honestly am starting to think that McDavid might not be the best player right now. Right now. Who's to say that, McDavid doesn't pick up his game a little more? And that could just be because, he's been on the Oilers for so long. He's been through those, playoff list years. But I think right now, if I were to trade one of them, I think I'm trading McDavid, honestly.
I think you're crazy.
I think I'm crazy too, Brody. I think I'm crazy too.
I would rather build a team around McDavid just because of the fact that whoever plays with McDavid, he makes them better. It doesn't matter who's on his line, they're going to produce. And Draisaitl
does that too.
Draisaitl is better defensively for sure, and like he's a better face-off person, but I still think McDavid's a more dynamic player, and I would build a team around Connor McDavid.
That's fair. Agree to disagree?
Agree to disagree, 100%.
So you're saying your nightmare situation for the Oilers come trade deadline is, what?
Oh, man. I would say...
Would it be not acquiring a goalie? Would it be, trading either Draisaitl or McDavid? You never know. Trade deadlines are crazy. What do you think it is?
For me, it would be not acquiring a defenseman. And the reason I say this is because Edmonton, they can obviously score goals, and their goaltending lately hasn't been all that bad. It's their 5-on-5 goals against. It's a big nightmare for the Oilers. And if you're going to be a playoff team and you're even going to get out of the first round and maybe make the second round, I don't see Edmonton going very far if they do get in, to be completely honest. But if you're the Oilers and you need to get out of the first round, or just any team in general, if you want to go on a playoff run, you have to have defense. You have to have a deep defense core. We're talking like 8 guys that you could slot in. Like the teams that go on long playoff runs are the teams that have the deepest defense and the best goaltending, and the Oilers don't have either of that. Their offense is fine. I don't have any issues with their offense or concerns with that. My biggest concern with the Oilers is they don't have a good shutdown defenseman or even a good defense core in general. So that's the biggest nightmare for me, would be not getting a defenseman.
I think you're right with that too. You look at the Oilers and you compare the Oilers 5-on-5 goal scoring compared to their power play goal scoring. Like, it's night and day. Their power play is so dominant. Their power play is so electric. But when it comes time to playoffs, those whistles go away. There's not that many power plays in playoff time. And I agree with you there. Defense does build championships. That's the old saying. And with the Oilers' current, defensive roster, I'm not even confident in the 6 guys they got playing, let alone having, an extra couple guys to slot in. Like, I don't want to say that, Calgary is winning the cup this year, but you look over at Calgary, it's like their top 6 has been so good this year. You got Hanifin and Anderson playing together. You got Shillington and Tanev, who have been great. And then you got Goodbranson and Zadorov, which at the beginning of the season, I was terrified for that defense pair. And they've really just absolutely been shut down. They've been fantastic for the Flames, and I'd like to point out that Eric Goodbranson just scored a goal for Calgary. They're up 3-2 on Colorado. But even then, you got Michael Stone that's been a healthy scratch. You got Connor Mackey that's in the minors that's ready to make the jump. You got Yusuf Valimaki that's been hit or miss, but he could definitely slot in some minutes. So like I was saying is that the Oilers, have been struggling big time when it comes to their, 6 defensemen that they've been using. And I agree with you. I do think that they need to bring in a defenseman, whether that be a Klingberg, whether that be a Ben Sherratt, even a Giordano, like I was saying. I'd hate to see that, but, the Oilers definitely do need a defenseman. I think one player that should go on the Oilers, and it's been evident for a while, and I've been saying it for a while, I think Tyson Barrie should be gone from the Oilers. He hasn't been the offensive weapon that they've had, in the past, and especially with Evan Bouchard now, crunching so many minutes and, playing on that power play. Bouchard's been such a better weapon than Tyson Barrie has for, his entry-level deal compared to Tyson Barrie making, like $4 million a year, I think, something like that.
Makes 4.5 for the next
4.5.
2. Yeah.
Yeah.
For a couple of seasons still, so.
Yeah, and Tyson Barrie he has not been all there for the Oilers. He hasn't played like his former self. So I think if there's anything you want to do as the Oilers, you want to get rid of Mike Smith's contract for sure. Bring up Stuart Skinner. He's on an entry-level deal. And then you want to get rid of Tyson Barrie making 4.5, and he's not giving you the numbers or the minutes that you want a guy making 4.5 to give you. So, yeah, I agree with you, Brody. I think the Oilers need a defenseman. It's tough to say because the goaltending for the Oilers has been inconsistent, but right now it's been good, especially in Koskinen, especially in Stuart Skinner. So I think the Oilers need to make a move and get a defenseman before they get a goalie. Absolutely.
And one thing, too, I should mention, people are going to be surprised to hear this, but I heard this while I was watching their game against Philadelphia. Koskinen actually had, going into that game, the best road record by a goalie in the NHL, which is obviously surprising, but he's been good on the road, and lately he hasn't been playing all that bad. I mean, that turnover against Chicago was just like a unfortunate mistake, but I mean, it happens.
I saw some numbers too. I don't remember the exact number. I want to say in the month of February, Koskinen went something like 10-1.
Yeah, he's gone like 6-1 in his last 7 or something. He's been playing pretty decent. Like, he's been playing pretty good hockey lately. So
he's been earning that $4 million contract that he got from Chiarelli. But like I said, if the goaltending's good now, you need to move on a defenseman, and especially if you build your D-core up, you're gonna have a better, you're going to play better in your defensive zone in front of your goalie. So I think, you can only go so far with a good goalie. Like, let's take a look at like Anaheim. You got John Gibson in net, a fantastic goalie, but there's only so much he can do with the D-core in front of him. And that's the same thing with Edmonton. Like, if Koskinen's playing lights out, good, but he's only going to get you so far if you don't have the defense in front of him. So I agree. I think the Oilers need a defenseman. They need to do a move right before the deadline or even sooner and get something on their blue line.
And they don't realize how badly they're missing Oscar Klefbom right now on LTIR. Like, when that guy's in the lineup, their defense just looks a whole lot better, and he logged so many minutes for them. He was even their number 1 over Darnell Nurse, and when he's been gone the last 2 years, it kind of forced them to bring in Duncan Keith on his contract. So they're definitely missing him. They're probably missing Ethan Bear as well. I mean, he was a solid young defenseman.
I can't get over that trade, man. Ethan Bear, that Carolina Edmonton game, man. Ethan Bear was on the ice against Connor McDavid in that game. He had something like 22 minutes of time on ice and was lights out, shut down. And it was such a funny moment just to watch unfold because Ethan Bear, the guy that the Oilers had, got rid of him, and then he goes out there and shuts down their best players. That was pretty funny.
They ran him out of town. I mean, he made one mistake in that series and he's gone. That's just typical Edmonton fans.
That's typical Oilers fashion. Like Jordan Eberle, anyone?
Yeah, Jordan Eberle, Taylor Hall, all of them pretty much. So,
but you got to give it to the Oilers fans, though. They are diehards. They love their team. They're going to ride their team hard, and you got to be, on the top of your game, or fans are not going to like you in Edmonton.
Passionate fan base for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I said this wasn't going to be very long of an episode, but we're creeping up on 45 minutes. So I hope you guys all enjoyed that, talking about teams and stuff like that. And if you guys enjoyed that, maybe we'll do a little bit more of that instead of just rambling on about news. So, yeah. Anything else you'd like to add before we end this episode, Brody?
Yeah, I would like to finish off the podcast talking about Rick Nash, who recently got his number retired for the Blue Jackets. Definitely well-deserving. He's had a fantastic career for the Blue Jackets, face of their franchise, their captain. So you definitely love to see that. And just your thoughts on that.
Well, he's the first Blue Jacket to wear number 61, and he's the last Blue Jacket to wear 61. I only think that's fitting. I think, Columbus really was only relevant because they had Rick Nash, and he carried that team for so long, and he has meant so much to the fans in Columbus, and definitely well-deserving banner raised there in Ohio for Rick Nash.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, he had a great career. I think he won a Rocket Richard. I think he tied with a Gendler or something like that.
He tied it Gendler.
Yeah, I think they had like 41 goals or something that season.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's definitely been a solid goal scorer for all of his career, and they made the playoffs with Rick Nash there as well. He got him to their first ever appearance. So definitely the face of their franchise. I could definitely see him moving forward, being with the Blue Jackets in some form of their organization. It wouldn't surprise me all that much.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's fit in one more thing before this episode is over. What you got?
I don't really got a whole heck
of a lot
left on my notes, to be honest with you.
Like I said at the beginning of this episode, it was pretty lackluster when it comes to news. Like the last couple of weeks, we've definitely been a little bit spoiled as hockey fans for the news around the world and the league. But we're getting closer and closer to trade deadline. I think, Brody, before the trade deadline hits, we're going to have an episode dedicated strictly to the trade deadline. That should be exciting. We'll give our hot takes, our potential trades, all that kind of fun stuff. But we hope you all enjoyed episode number 6 of the Cherry Pickers podcast. Our podcast is available on every streaming platform, including Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and even YouTube. So we upload one episode every single week, Sunday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we appreciate you all for tuning in and listening to the Cherry Pickers podcast, and we hope you have a good one. Take care. Oh, it's not going to be that long of an episode.